Welcome everybody to this evening's team coaching webinar hangout. This is Krister Lowe, and I'm really excited to have those joining us. We have a small group of folks attending this evening, most in the United States, one in Nairobi in Africa. So nice to have folks joining us from around. This evening we have invited David Tate, Dr. David Tate, and also Jane Abitanta. They've been recent guests. Jane was a guest in episode number 10, and David most recently, I believe, episode number 15. And what we like to do on these these monthly team coaching zone webinar hangouts is really throw away the agenda, and I think in good sort of coaching mode, really work what's in the moment and what's emergent, and really allow the space to create some space for something to emerge out of the conversation. So I think all of us are here because we're interested and passionate about the topic of team coaching. So let's see a little bit this evening where the session takes us. I think it'd be great just for some quick introductions since we have a small group, but I'd love to, have Jane. I know you were introducing yourself to David a little bit earlier, and then David, I wouldn't mind you introducing yourself as well. So I'll give it to you guys. Do you want to just do a quick introduction to yourselves? I mean, the listeners of this webinar or listeners of the podcast, if they listen to your episode, they probably know you really well. But for those who haven't, maybe this is a good chance just to do a quick introduction to you all, and then we can get the dialogue going. So, David or Jane, either of you care to jump in first?
Since Jane already introduced herself offline, and I guess we'll do a re-up on that in a moment, I'm happy to jump in first. So, so I've been involved in coaching for the last probably 13 years. My background is in clinical and organizational psychology, and I started coaching mainly within, we were talking about niches earlier. I guess if I had a niche, my niche would be leadership development within family enterprises and other what I would call highly relational systems where there are sort of long-term relationships involved. Sometimes that looks like a group of partners who are maybe related, maybe unrelated, but have been working together for a long time and therefore have long-standing relationships, and that's a factor in the mix in terms of being a team and how to work through challenges in the midst of these sort of long-standing relationships. So a lot of what I do is coaching individuals, and I also coach teams in those kinds of systems. So in addition, I am a assistant clinical professor at Yale University in psychiatry, and I teach some classes in interpersonal dynamics and organizational assessment. And I also still maintain a small clinical practice as well. So I have a number of different hats that I wear, but I like variety, so that's a good thing.
Awesome, David. Well, great to have you joining us this evening. And I know just a little bit as an aside, I was on a coaching message board online in LinkedIn. There's a number of LinkedIn groups. I think it's called the Business Coaching Group or something. And there was somebody in there posting about family enterprises and family businesses. And so anyways, I commented on our episode and our blog post that we wrote. I think we wrote a blog post also about family enterprise systems. What's it called? The crouching, something about the hidden, what was it called? Maybe you know that.
Crouching tigers and hidden dragons.
Right, of coaching family, working with family enterprise teams and systems. And anyways, he really loved that article because he was talking about the positive side or the advantages of family enterprises. And I think we spoke in that little blog post in our episode about what are some of the advantages of teams that are comprised of family systems, but also there are some other hidden fault lines or other sides. So anyways, he appreciated that in the post. So awesome. Well, Jane, do you want to do a brief introduction to yourself, and then we can see who else is on the call today and get it going.
Sure. I'm Jane Abitanta, and I started my company, which is called Percival Associates, in 1996. I've been doing coaching for that long. I have a business background, an MBA from Fordham, and then I did another master's at Teachers College University at Columbia University, and finished that in 2008. And my client base is largely in the investment management space and all over the world, but I'm based here in New York. And David, it's interesting that you work with family enterprises. I actually work with family offices.
I was going to ask you about that.
Exactly. Those family enterprises who largely sell their businesses and then have to figure out what to do with the proceeds of the sale. And so we can talk about this later, but one of the things I'm doing right now is coaching the chief investment officer of a huge, wealthy Midwest family office, and it's fascinating. The dynamics are fascinating. Anyway, but that's a little bit about me. Krista, I hope that's enough about me.
Yeah,
So
sure.
get into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if folks want to get to know you guys more, they can go to the Team Coaching Zone website. There are show notes pages, and the episodes about you guys. When we had the podcast interview, gets into a little bit more detail about your interesting background. So definitely would recommend that. So, anyways, we just have a couple of folks on the line tonight. I don't know if you guys are comfortable or interested in introducing yourselves. Might be interesting to get to know you a little bit. I know Kathy Vaughn from she's based in Nairobi. Well, Kathy, are you comfortable coming on and sharing a little bit about yourself? I know you've been making the shift from really a rich background in conflict resolution, and then became an ICF certified coach, and now have been getting coach training and team coaching. And I think it'd be really interesting for folks to hear a little bit about your journey. Are you willing to share a little bit?
Thank you, Krista. So
Yeah.
good morning, good evening, everyone. How are you?
Excellent.
Well.
Great to have you joining us from Nairobi at 2:30 in the morning. Brave soul.
We can stop that, Krista. It's okay. I'm
I
up.
know.
I'm
I just
awake.
love it. I love it.
So as Krista said, strong background in conflict resolution. Actually ran a mediation center in New York City before relocating to Kenya almost 8 years ago. In terms of coaching, I've had the pleasure of working as a coach through different organizations to their team members, and through that developed a real interest in how do you work with everyone together as opposed to in silos and in different relationships. And I'm now working with delivery of coaching to different teams, but possibly using more than one coach. So I'm having a really interesting conversation currently where trying to really help the client understand the value, even if they're using different coaches, of the value of those coaches somehow working together, or having everyone still come together. And maybe it would be interesting to hear thoughts on how do you do that when maybe you know the other coach, maybe you don't, but what do you do when the client really wants different coaches to work with the same team around similar business objectives?
Oh, fascinating.
Interesting challenge, yeah.
Yeah. And Kathy, I think you're also, you've been checking out some different team coach training programs around the world as well, right? Isn't that true? Could you share a little bit more about that? I think that could be interesting for folks.
Sure. So the interest first led me to take a team and group coach, a systemic team coaching program with the Academy of Executive Coaching in the UK. That's based on work by Peter Hawkins.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Hawkins, right here.
Yeah, the See Clear. Oh, you have the book there. Okay, great. I don't have the book.
Yeah, well, and I'm supposed to be interviewing. I'm going to be interviewing Peter Hawkins this week, and I know David, I think you're a fan of Peter Hawkins' work, right?
I am.
Yeah.
I've read that book and have, gotten a lot of great ideas for team coaching through it.
Cool. We can talk a little bit about that. So you did some coach training with them, Kathy?
Yep, and then I did also the team and group coaching with Jennifer Britton, who was one of your recent
I just happened to by chance have Jennifer's book. So you did some of the work for me tonight, Kathy. I was going to mention just a couple of things I'm reading right now. So I interviewed Jennifer Britton a while back, and she was really wonderful. And I actually had a couple of Peter Hawkins students, Jacqueline Peters and Catherine Carr, and they actually co-published a dissertation, which is really interesting because most of the times when you do a doctoral dissertation, you have to do it individual, but they were able to actually this is in the UK, they co-published a dissertation together on team coaching. And I think they were the second dissertation out in the doctoral dissertation on the topic of team coaching. So, and they had Peter Hawkins as I believe as their primary advisor on that. So anyways, that's how I stumbled into learn a little bit more about Peter Hawkins, and reached out to him recently, and he accepted to be interviewed. So that should be interesting. I think we're going to be exploring the topic of systemic team coaching in that interview. But say more, Kathy, about what your experiences were like with those programs.
Well, one's done over the phone, with Jennifer. And I think what I've really appreciated is the design, including the pre-work that we have to do, and then what I call laser check-in coaching. And that's actually something that I've included now in my program offerings.
Say more about that.
What do you offer the check-in points? Well, if I'm doing like a coaching relationship for 5 months, I'll offer like one check-in at the request of the client. I build it in to the price and the program, and I think that's something I've appreciated. With the 3-day systemic team coaching, that's really face to face, and there's a lot of reliance on gestalt and movement, and that's been really interesting to try to show other people who may not be as comfortable with body sculpting, like, not constellations, but people kind of organizing themselves. If you're not used to that, it's a very interesting activity, and I had the opportunity to give a demo to a group of teams working on an innovation challenge where they were giving feedback to each other. We used one team to kind of show how the team was feeling about itself, and then have everyone else look and say, okay, now I understand maybe how did I relate to this team or not. So it was an interesting little demo. So that's been fun.
Awesome. Excellent. Cool. So, it's interesting. I'm going down this in May now to North Carolina to do a 3-day team coach training program. It's called the Team Advantage program with DJ Mitch. She was one of the founding board members of the International Coaching Federation. And one of my colleagues, Sandra Hayes, is going there. And I think actually one of the listeners of the podcast also is heading down there. So about 9 of us are going to go through a 3-day intensive. She has a program. It's called the Team Advantage. If you listen to that episode number 9, a really powerful episode where she talks about scaling team coaching with 60 teams in a pharmaceutical company. And this was in the U.S. It's a global company, but in the U.S., 25% of all the teams in the U.S. practice was about 25% of all the teams, so 60 of them. And they were able to sort of do team coaching on a scale level, and it had just really dramatic impact on the results. And so she has this basically like 16-week approach. It's all virtual. I think they may do some front-end kickoff. But anyways, I'm going to go down and check out that training. And I'd be curious to hear from David and Jane as well. I mean, I sort of evolved into team coaching as I think just as a practitioner, starting off in training and then moving into facilitation. And then I've been pursuing my coach training with CTI and sort of getting more and more coaching clients, and then, started dabbling in team coaching. But I hadn't been formally trained yet. And so it's interesting to see that, I think there are these programs starting to percolate up, and that maybe something we could talk about a little bit more. But just before we get into David and Jane, I'd be curious to hear a little bit about your journey into team coaching. And actually, it might be interesting, Kathy, to hear from you as well. Maybe that could be a little bit of a talk, part of our conversation tonight is how do we find our way into team coaching? But Raphael, would you be willing to share a little bit about yourself and background and your interest in team coaching?
Yes, thank you, everybody. Yes, my name is Rafael Durand, and I live in Memphis, Tennessee. I work for a multinational company. I work for International Paper. I'm an HR professional.
Nice.
And I started coaching a couple of years ago. I got certified by the Columbia University coaching program.
Right.
And I'm an organizational coach. I'm coach internally, and I just started to get interested in team coaching. I haven't done it. It's my interest in participating in these webinar sessions is to learn more about what others are doing, and I see a lot of value in expanding the scope of my practice into team coaching. So that's the main reason for me to participate in these webinars.
That's awesome. And Rafael, I know you have a very dynamic son as well, right? Who's also a graduate of the Columbia program, and I think he's doing a bit of work in team coaching as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Alex is he pretty much established his own practice, Framework Consulting, and Yeah, he's the youngest graduate from the Columbia coaching program, so I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, he's a really dynamic guy. We've had some conversations offline about team coaching. I know he's starting to do some work in that area, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting him as a guest on the podcast at some point. So, which would be wonderful. But
Exactly.
yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit, from David and Jane and Kathy, just about your journey into team coaching. I mean, I guess sort of my evolution towards this. As come from a number of sources. I talk about that in some of the early episodes of the podcast where I share a bit about my own journey to this. But I really started off in training and then really started working with groups, small and large group facilitation. And I think after about 10 or 15 years of that, I found that sometimes it was catalytic, and you know individuals would go about some transformation as a result of that. I know Kathy and I been involved really heavily in the United Nations systems, bringing a lot of capacity building around conflict resolution, and many folks who attended our courses ended up going on to become mediators. And so I think there were some catalytic events there. I found a lot of damaged teams and broken teams, and we did a lot of great, I think, repair work, getting teams back up and running. But over time, sometimes I would have the luxury to work with teams on an annual basis and, do annual retreats, and we'd get this great energy going after a couple of days, and, everybody's singing and dancing out of the room, and then you'd meet up with them the next year and the same issues would be back on the table, and there was something about, I think when coaching came along for me, which really helped shift my mindset a little bit more from really an event-based mindset around training and group and team facilitation to something a little bit more. It's something about the relationship, co-creating a relationship over time where it's not so prescriptive, but really allows the client to grow. And, I think that for me really sort of is what drew me to ultimately to one-on-one coaching with leaders and managers. And then as a result of doing that work, obviously, when you're working with leaders and managers, they don't exist without a team. And so I think the natural extension really for me was to then really begin trying to think about coaching the team. So that's really sort of how I stumbled into it. And I know from interviewing many of the folks on the podcast, many people didn't come right out of the gate into team coaching, right? It's been an evolution of their practice. But now what I think is really interesting, maybe we'll talk about this. I have some really great interviews with guests coming up in future episodes. And some of them were like really early pioneers in this. One of them I'm going to be interviewing next Monday, Marita Frijan. She's one of the sort of early pioneers in came out of the CTI world. She developed a systems coach training program called the CRR Global, or the Center for Right Relationships. They have a team coaching and systems coaching program called the Organizational Systems or what's called Organization and Relationship Systems Program. And she talked about how 15 years ago, trying to bring team coaching into organizations, how folks would really look at them like they were aliens and like really strange, people. And now in really the last couple of years, there's just been an increasing receptivity for it, right? So it's interesting to think about maybe the next generation of practitioners coming up, they may be able to accelerate their trajectory into team coaching much, quicker than it took us to get there. But anyways, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about your journey into that. And I know, this Thursday I have another interview guest coming on, Herb Stevenson. He was the founder of the Cleveland Consulting Group. And if you're familiar with that, it's a Gestalt, really well-known Gestalt training program. And he also, I think, we talked in that episode just around sort of the emergence of team coaching, that the operating environment that companies are in are really requiring more collective thinking and collective action. And so the context is maybe really ripening to become more receptive for companies to go in on a larger scale around team coaching. But anyways, I'm curious what you guys think about that and how that dovetails with your own journey into this area.
I have a point of view on that. I think that it's Jane. Sorry.
Yeah.
As we've talked about in the past, because my team coaching work happened, it was definitely evolutionary. I started doing more consulting and individual coaching, and it evolved to team coaching. And I do work with my clients over time. So I have some clients I've worked with for over 10 years. And so the challenge I have there is not becoming part of the system and part of the problem. But the other thing I think that I do on a team coaching basis is a lot of what I do is stealth coaching. So that in the atmosphere, the organizational atmosphere in which I operate, very often coaching per se and team coaching specifically is not understood or not really valued. So I feel like I do a lot of behind the scenes stealth team coaching with my clients.
Yeah, I have a client right now that I'm working with that's in higher education, and they brought me in to do sort of a school-wide retreat back in January. And one of the things I sort of contracted with them around was they wanted me to do a retreat now this past January, and then another one next January where it's going to be a larger multi-stakeholder retreat. And if you know a little bit about higher education is really in a big crisis right now. There's declining enrollment, and just basically the business model is really broken. And in a way, higher education is almost like government in a way. It's been really slow to innovate. It's sort of, there's very deep traditions about the way leadership and management is practiced. And so anyway, so when I contracted with them, I said, I'm not so interested in just running these 2 sessions unless we do some sustainable work in between year 1 and 2. And so this is dovetailing a little bit on what you're saying, Jane. So I pitched to them the idea of leadership coaching for the whole leadership team. There's like 7 leaders in this group. So coaching them as a team, one-on-one coaching, and also what I would call partnership coaching, which is the dean of the school, the faculty chairperson, and sort of the assistant dean for administration. And that relationship of those 3 really could benefit. So I basically laid out like 3 options for them. They were totally stupefied and dumbfounded by the team coaching, the concept of team coaching. They'd opted not to do the partnership coaching, but I had 3 of the 7 leaders have bought in for one-on-one coaching. And now what's emerging is we're probably going to get them ready. They're getting on board with a team coaching for 4 months this fall. And so it's interesting, I think I've been sort of debating a little bit with certain clients. Do I just come in right through the front door and a little shock therapy and blast them with the idea of team coaching, even if the initial reaction might be resistance, and now they seem to be warming up with it a little bit. But I hear you that it's, for whatever reason, I find it really interesting when I'm in companies, when I talk about team coaching, people kind of look dumbfounded, and anyways, curious.
Yeah. Think about how long it took for just coaching to be more accepted as it's actually, I think, almost standard, as opposed to, remember back in the day where you only had a coach if you had a problem or there was something to be fixed. And now I think people are really looking at it from more of a development point of view. I think the same thing will happen with team coaching. We just need to help them see it and understand it. Yeah. We have to define it, Krister.
Well, I think that's true. And I think that's an opportunity for folks like us to try to influence that. I think group coaching probably is maybe the bridge between individual coaching and team coaching, and that's becoming a little bit more commonplace, group coaching, especially among leaders. I see, David, your head's bobbing a little bit there. What are your thoughts about this? Yeah.
Well, just to back up, in terms of my kind of entry to team coaching, I started working with groups of people more clinically. I was trained as a family therapist. So, the idea of entering a kind of a family either in crisis or where there was, challenging things going on and trying to be help the family unit understand itself differently is sort of thinking about a group of people in a slightly different way. So so in addition to that, I also was trained as a group psychotherapist and did many years of training and understanding group dynamics and interpersonal dynamics that unfold within group contexts. So I think that was a really helpful background in terms of bringing, when I started doing coaching, I saw a very natural application of those kinds of things and sort of combining that with this sort of goal-oriented, accountability-focused, very positive kind of thrust of coaching and bringing that to teams. And so I found that some groups that I work with as teams kind of appreciate the idea and of seeing themselves as a team that with the help of a coach can do better at whatever it is that they're trying to do better at, which kind of varies depending on what the team is. And then in other cases, I can see, what you guys are saying, the sort of challenges people may have in seeing the benefit of a team coach, or, maybe, and that in some cases also, I'm doing group coaching, which is a bit different than team coaching, as some of your guests on the podcast have discussed more at length, Krister. But yeah, so I don't know. For me, it just felt like a natural evolution in actually bringing together of sort of different ways that I've been interacting with groups, or people working together in a in a different way, and just kind of bringing that up a notch, and bringing the energy of coaching to it. So.
Cool.
I'm really interested, Krister, in what you had to say about, and what you both have said, specifically when you're talking about kind of going in there through the front door and doing a little shock value. I just had a conversation today with a client who's got a partnership that's had some evolution, and they desperately need team coaching, but they have a key. There's a key partner who's pretty powerful, who's not going to get it, doesn't get it, doesn't want it, doesn't see the value, and it's kind of holding the whole group back. And so I'd love to have some help as to how to help him see that they need to do this for the group. Whether or not they do it with me, they need to do it. How do I come in through the front door?
So you want to provide a little bit more context for the group you're working with?
It's a well-established firm that's having some performance issues, and they, as a result, there's been an evolution in terms of the composition of their partnership, and which I see as an opportunity to really do some work together, come together, but there's one key partner who is very powerful, has very good performance, owns more of the partnership than the others. So it's all about money, in terms of who has what, and doesn't see the value of work together, is not really interested in how the group works together, particularly, and doesn't see that that's holding the whole firm back, the fact that the partnership is not working together as effectively as they could.
And you hold a different perspective.
I do indeed.
That there's a burning platform there.
Standing outside and having worked with this firm for a number of years now, you can see it. I feel like it's pretty plain to see.
Right. Well, David, you're a psychiatrist, so this probably gets into the realm of, resistance, and but all of us as coaches, I think, do a little bit with resistance. But yeah, I think you wanted to react to Jane's comment. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Jane, I would just say that, that is a challenging situation, particularly given that this person, if this person holds a majority interest, there's no, the partners don't necessarily have leverage over this person to be able to, figure out a way to convince him to at least try it and be open-minded to it. So it is a bit of a challenge in that context. I guess, a couple questions. What's your relationship like with this individual?
Distant at best. I think I have his respect, but we've not done a lot of work together. What work we have done together has been really good, and I think has had an impact on him. But that was over a year ago, and it seems kind of distant.
Okay.
So you've been mainly doing consulting?
I'm sorry?
You mainly been doing consulting for this group?
Consulting and individual coaching.
Okay, but just not with this person?
No. Okay. I did a little bit of coaching with him, but very specifically, and over a year ago. And I think that what my plan is, and what I've been trying to do, is advise their internal organization people, staff, to basically help him see what's in it for him to do it, and why his life will be better, and he'll get more of what he wants
And you're talking about individual
this.
coaching, but or also team coaching.
Well, I think we need to have him understand the value of the team coaching.
Okay. And do you get a sense that he sees the value in individual coaching?
No.
I guess that would be sort of the bridge that, going back to my example of this case that I have, starting really with one-on-one coaching with the leader to really start to demystify a little bit that and have some real experience of growth. And, sometimes this is where maybe some of these assessments can kind of come in as a way of, trying to open up, getting people into a learning and discovery place, right? Because, so, I think there's a variety of instruments out there that could help with that. But David, look like you wanted to say something.
That's a good point, Krister. I'd say if you can get them interested in at least doing some kind of a team assessment to just understand, for the team to understand some of what its strengths are, what its development opportunities are, and just as a snapshot in a sense. It's less of a commitment than a full team coaching engagement, but could also shine light on how team coaching could be helpful if they wanted to move forward on making changes in the way they function together. And we'll sort of highlight.
Do you guys have favorite instruments when you have to do a team assessment?
Yeah, so the one I've been using lately, which I really, really like, is the Team Emotional Intelligence Survey. Yep. And I talked a little bit about this on the podcast with Krister, but it looks at 9 kind of what they call team emotional intelligence norms that are, sort of empirically linked with better performance. Teams that are higher in emotional intelligence have, on an average, 25%, improved results. So, in looking at it that way, it's sort of like going for a fitness test or a checkup, and saying, okay, where are we on this? And it's a smaller ask in terms of the commitment.
Yeah.
It might be a foot in the door that would interest them just to take it further. Particularly
the link to performance. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make a comment here, and I'll call see if Kathy and Raphael want to jump in here or not as well. I have one team coaching client now, which started off in a one-on-one coaching engagement with it's a financial leader, a senior financial leader in an institution, and he was basically being given coaching as a reward and as a way to try to keep him in the firm. And so basically it was sort of a reward. So he wasn't sure he even wanted coaching, and so when he showed up to the coaching, he's like, well, I'm willing to do this, but I'm not sure I even know what coaching's about. And I don't really feel like I have any issues that I need coaching on. And so anyways, we had a couple sessions, and then, we started to discover some areas where, he might be able to grow a little bit more. I had him do the NBI Thinking Preferences Assessment, which was a really easy entry vehicle. And I did this, I think, maybe in the second session. And that one was sort of like just starting to try to help him become a little bit more aware of himself and have some frameworks to get outside of himself, to get that sort of balcony view and to see himself. And what's nice about the MBI, it really gets at, cognition and emotion and local left hemisphere and right hemisphere thinking preferences. And he was a really cognitive kind of thinker. So he was really good at analytical work, but he was also really good at, strategic thinking. And he was running into some issues around that, but so anyways, that was sort of the beginning of a little bit of awareness and insight coming. About 5 sessions into the coaching, I then did a 360 with him. And he was a very data-oriented guy. And we sort of, what oftentimes happens when you do a leadership 360 and you combine it with something like the MBI is oftentimes the area where they have low preference is where they're getting feedback in the 360 that they need to develop more. And I think he was so ready for the 360, and because he was such a data-oriented guy, like he loved the 360 feedback. And we found lots of juicy things to do coaching around. A lot of them were around emotions, not all of them, but really around his emotional engagement as a leader. which gets into the whole realm of emotional intelligence. But had I gone right into the front door of that coaching engagement talking about doing emotional intelligence, and it was so far from his reality that the NBI was a nice little bridge. And by 10 sessions, we were doing some really great, juicy work. And then what's neat about the story is it ultimately led to now an ongoing team coaching engagement with his team. And so anyways, that's sort of a story of starting with a leader who, I don't think he may have been as resistant as the one you're talking about, though, but he definitely wasn't sure he even wanted coaching, and
But that's great. Thank you. Tell me, I'm sorry, you said the MBI. I don't know that I'm figuring out what that is.
Yeah, the NBI thinking preferences, it's kind of like a Myers-Briggs type assessment. I know, David, you're trained in the NBI as well. And I think all of these I think everybody has sort of their favorite instruments, and there are other ones. I mean, I think the value of instruments, I've sort of gone a little bit back and forth on instruments over the years. I think the value of instruments is they're a really accessible, easy way to get started and to start discovery around self-awareness. And I know, Jane, you really like the intentional change theory out of Case Western, right, with Boyatzis, and you met Boyatzis. I don't know if David and the others are familiar with that work, but basically what Richard Boyatzis really is in intentional change theory looks at 5 different discoveries people need to go through in order to create sustainable change or lasting change. And I think what's beautiful about a tool like the NBI and some of these others, it really helps with some of these early discoveries around oneself, around strengths and areas for development, and that really can kind of get the ball rolling. So I'm curious, Kathy and Raphael, if you guys have anything to chime in on this topic. I'm sure you have faced, in your organizational coaching practices. Raphael, you want to jump in?
Yes, I'm really very interesting to me how the three of you evolved or transitioned from individual coaching, one-to-one coaching into team coaching, and how the common denominators of the problems or the issues that you've been sharing with the group in terms of how the dynamics of the leader in the team impacts the overall not only performance but dynamics within the team. And so this is something that, even though I don't practice team coaching yet, is something that I deal with almost in every single situation that I am coaching on a one-to-one basis. And I normally start with a kind of a coachability index, very simple survey, and most of my clients ended up rating at a level that we pretty much engage in the sessions, but along the way, we have to in many instances to do some checking and adjusting to what extent they were really, truly willing to deep into addressing issues that they start to discover. And in some cases, I've faced situations where the client says, you know what, I'm not interested in getting in this direction. And we can continue addressing other things, but I'm not really interested in addressing this direction. So my question here, when you face this level of resistance in aspects of the leadership of that individual that your gut tells you that is impacting negatively the team dynamic, how do you address the team coaching overall? Because you can continue working with a team, but unless you address that particular aspect of the leader, you may not really get all the positive results that the team expects you to help them achieve
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
I think it's a really great comment, Raphael, and insight. And if there's one sort of common denominator from my own experiences, and I think what I've been hearing in most of the interviews I'm doing, when team coaching isn't working out, it's when the leader is unable to take up their role in an effective way as a leader. And I think and I guess my initial reaction is I think it's really hard to do team coaching if the leader's not on board. And I think in the cases where I've had team coaching, things that have unraveled or fallen apart, it's usually that I really needed to get the leader ready to do the team coaching work, and I've jumped in too quickly into working with the team, and the leader really wasn't quite there. And oftentimes the common denominator is they're technically competent leaders who just really are not really fully able yet to take on their role as relationship leaders and people leaders. And so I think in that case, really ideally doing one-on-one coaching, like in this example I just shared, I think had I gone into team coaching with that finance leader right out of the gate, he wouldn't have been able to do it. And so working with him for 4 to 6 months gave him a launching pad to get really excited about his own development and become less threatened by coaching and experience some of that. And, that led to, I think, more of a sustainable change process with his team. I have an inverse example where I went right to the team and it unraveled. I talk about this in episode number 2. And if I could go back and do that engagement over again, there was enough warning signs that the team, they weren't ready for team coaching. And I needed to really try to get the leader on board beforehand. And again, you can't force people to do that work, but there's also, I'm sorry, one quick other thing. Episode number 7, Dr. Jerome Prives has a really great really good case story, which is still unfolding now because I'm familiar with this and I've been supporting him a little bit on the sidelines of coaching the C-suite of a technology company. And basically they wanted to do leadership 360 feedback and coaching more for like legal reasons and to sort of protect themselves legally. And so anyways, he started getting involved with some coaching with the senior leaders, and they were really resistant. They really just wanted to do like 15-minute 360 feedback, one shot, and just sort of check off the box. And, he's a pretty gutsy coach, and he kind of challenged them a lot more and hung in there with them. And a lot of resistance. I mean, I think a lot of people would have walked away and fired the client, but he really hung in there with a little bit of supervision and support in the background to just get his own ego out of the way to hang in there with the group. And now many of the C-suite leaders are coming around and their coachability has gone up. I think their coachability index would have been, below 0 or whatever your index is. He's been building, I think coaching readiness through a lot of resistance. I think he'd be a great person to connect with or listen to his episode. It's a really good story of really sort of overcoming really serious resistance. And now it's having a huge impact on the leadership team. And a lot of those sort of C-suite leaders are now wanting coaching for their teams within their functional areas. But
that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, Dave, you want to jump in here, or Kathy? I don't know.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I was going to echo a little bit of what you said, Krister, about the advantage of being able to coach the leader first individually before working with the team. I've done that in 2 different situations, and it does 2 things. One, it prepares the leader, to be able to receive feedback and to get more comfortable with that, and to get a sense of who they are as a leader and what their strengths and opportunities are as it relates to how they work with the team. And it also positions coaching as something that is desirable, and that, with the leader modeling that coaching is a good idea for everyone, I think it increases that buy-in to the idea of coaching for other individuals. So I just wanted to sort of remark on that. And then to the question that Raphael raised about the challenges of if you have somebody who goes certain distance and then is suddenly resistant. One of the strategies that I've used is not pulling people out, but having some individual kind of check-in coaching sessions with individuals on the team as I'm working with the team. If they are having some kind of a challenge with the process, like really try to understand what that's about for them, to understand what their fears are, what the concerns are, and see, where's the the possible points of, movement that might be available to help them shift and be able to kind of, continue, because maybe, there's a, those spots are actually possible points for a breakthrough to happen for them individually. And if you can find that, it can, help them sort of continue. So I've had that happen, and had that had opportunities for success with that, as well as places where, I tried that and, it was difficult to get the shift to occur. So, but I just would offer that as a possible strategy.
I mean, in some ways, yeah, I really like where you're going. And part of my training, I did my training with, and I'm almost finished now with it, with CTI. One of the things they talk about is oftentimes when you start to bump up against some real resistance, it's usually that you're actually around something that's really juicy. And probably, Raphael, you're doing a really good job coaching that person because you've touched on something that's really sensitive, and that's why you're getting a lot of pushback. And so in some ways, I guess the question is then, what are the models around dealing with resistance? I think in the CTI training, if you can just be with the person in that space around it and try to just sort of be with them a little while, and not try to fix it or work it, and maybe give them a little bit of inquiry to take home to think about, you might be able to get a little, so whatever's happening, a lot of serious psychological defenses are coming up, and not to write them off too quickly, to hang in there a little bit and maybe just be with them in that space of resistance, and maybe just explore a little bit about what's challenging about that. And I don't know if your client has been able to share with you a little bit more about what is it that they're uncomfortable proceeding around. But sometimes,
Yes,
go ahead.
what I've found is that as you stay in the space, and it can actually take weeks, and you can the client brings you back probably through the back door to areas that he or she wasn't comfortable to explore. And so that's been my experience. And what I like is, David, your suggestion on combining team and individual coaching when helping a team move forward. So I that resonated. So thank you for that input.
Cool.
You're welcome. I also want to offer one other resource around resistance, which I think has been helpful, and that comes from the literature on motivational interviewing. This is a technique that was originally developed to work with people who are having challenges with substance abuse and other health-related issues, to help them engage in treatment. Again, an area where you find folks having tremendous resistance to the process. And they were determined by, first of all, assuring people that they are fully at choice in whatever they decide to do. Number one, kind of puts people at ease rather than making them feel that they have to do, that they're being compelled to do something. So that's sort of one basic sort of tenet. But then by asking them a series of questions, which helps them explore their motivations for either doing, moving in a particular direction or not, creates a non-threatening conversation where they can look at that and really begin to explore their reasons actually for moving ahead with the thing that they're resisting. And as they talk more about their reasons for it, they're actually more likely to then go ahead and do that going forward. That's what the research in this area suggests. I have a colleague named Dr. Michael Pantalon, who's here at Yale, who wrote a book about this called Instant Influence, and that's how to get anyone to do anything fast, I think it's called. Basically, it's
that sounds good.
it's a book about motivational interviewing and how to apply it in coaching. So I think it would be a good resource for folks.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Kathy, I don't know if you'd like to jump in here. We were sharing, as you heard, a little bit about just our journey into team coaching, and what got us there and why did that get us excited. But also, obviously, you've been hearing a little bit of the dialogue. I wanted to give you a chance to jump in here too, if you wanted to, if anything resonated with you or.
No, I just think I think it's about awareness. Two comments that just come up is I pick up on Jane's comment about not being part of the system and being aware when people start to see you as part of the system. because obviously then the intervention's not sustainable. So building into your practice the check-in, the honesty, the reflection, where you can see if you're becoming part of it or you're being viewed as part of it. The second is just around readiness of the leader. You and I talked a while back about a possible coaching program I wanted to do, and in the end I had said to you I wouldn't do it if the leader didn't really see himself participating in it. And so it did not go forward. So I think readiness and timing, even more than readiness, timing is really everything. So yeah.
Yeah, that sort of echoes for me with Greg Burns back in episode number 8. He had some really great examples of coaching that sort of really worked, and he talks a lot about how many leaders today are just like in a foxhole, that they're so under threat. It's just really hard for them to be able to show up in a team coaching setting to be able to focus on the other, because they're so focused on themselves given how much threat they're under. And he has a sort of an approach to team coaching where he really works with trying to really get the leader in their best possible place, a place of strength. He does all kinds of research on their background on LinkedIn and other places to find out what their interests are, so that when he does coaching with them, he really gets the leader out of the foxhole in a place of strength so they're really able to lead. And then he gets them engaged with the team, but they're in a place of high motivation and strength, and he really won't take them into the team until he gets them there. But he also shared one story of a miss, so to speak, of a leader who really just wasn't ready. And it came out a little bit later, 6 months or a year later, that person was going through a lot of difficult period in their life, and they just really weren't a place where they really could engage fully in the coaching. And during the process, there was an interpretation that he just wasn't coachable. And the person who hired Greg also said that, wondered whether he was coachable or not. And it turned out that I guess I'm a believer that everybody's coachable, but to Kathy's point, maybe not at all the time, right? There may be times in our life where we're just really not ready to do the work or willing to do the work, and you kind of can't. You can bring the horse to water, but you can't force him to drink, right? Cool. So, but Kathy, just to back to a little bit of the question earlier, just around what was it about what is it that drew you to team coaching? Because, right, you didn't come out in your career right out of the gate in team coaching, but what is it that drew you to that? And I'm curious a little bit about your evolution into this area.
So I think it goes back to just how I got into coaching. Running a mediation center where people are coming in with issues all the time. And people either not wanting to engage in mediation or being unable to for a variety of different reasons. I was looking to how do I then support the person who's taken the agency to come with an issue. And coaching seemed to be that point, that strategy. And then when I relocated, I saw it as connecting to training, how to transfer learning back to work. And then I think a little bit like your story with the higher education team, we go to the retreats, we get work done, but then nothing happens. And so you can consult, or you could coach, or you could build their capacity to figure it out. There's different interventions, and I think team coaching works for some teams, and others really need to own it themselves, and don't want outsiders. I'm almost happy with their dysfunction and recognizing that. So I think that's really how it's evolved for me, and then just working with the group dynamics. That's how it's evolved, and it's not something that people do here very well. I think there's a lot more group coaching around life issues. But as I said, I've seen it in a few cases where it seems really useful, and then with this one particular client that I'm having discussions with, I think it's almost essential. And I would love, if anyone has thoughts on working with different coaches where you're all coaching the same members of a team, what tips, what to think about?
How often does that group of coaches meet as a group, or has it ever met together?
So this is a potential opportunity, but the design would be two or three coaches with, like 10 to 12 other members, with like each coach taking 3 to 4 people. So they had not considered the coaches meeting at all. And that's something that I know at least one of the other coaches being considered has discussed as well. I think it's essential that there's a check-in with the coaches, but even more so than that, I think it's essential that the entire team sits together at some point to check in. Mm-hmm. I think that's a team coaching session. I don't know if they'll go for that, but I don't see. And then if the team is sitting together, then the coaches need to be somehow discussing as well. That's my thinking. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Did you have a thought?
I'm just curious in terms of the design. Is there opportunity for the team to sit together maybe at 3 points, the beginning, maybe a midpoint check-in at the end of the program, just as sort of these anchor points, which would allow opportunity for the, to kind of roll out the program as an entity, and then also have opportunities for, both the coaches and the participants to share their hopes, expectations, thoughts, wishes at the outset, process thing in the middle, and at the end some sort of a conclusion about what the learnings have been and what people's what their experiences have been. I think that could be really a huge value add, and would make it more a comprehensive program as a bunch of rather than a bunch of individual unrelated coaching programs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so my question then is that the role of these 2 or 3 coaches, are they the coach? Are they just participants? Is this a group connect, or is this a team coaching?
It seems like it's a hybrid in some ways, because I think it sounds like it's designed as an intervention mostly for these individual coaching engagements, but it would be creating a more creating a more explicit, like this is actually an organizational intervention where we're intervening with all of these members of this team. So it's not entirely a team coaching engagement, but it's adding a sort of a I don't know what you would call it exactly, but sort of a team kind of check-in component that is maybe being able to share the learning and share the experience. And I think that really is helpful in increasing kind of organizational, interpersonal understanding within the team. It creates some, which is actually one of those factors that's particularly linked with team performance, is people's ability to kind of at least understand, what the needs and perspectives are of the other team members. So I think it would certainly could be built in as something that's going to really add a lot of extra value in terms of what the organization gets out of this this engagement.
Thanks, David. That's really helpful.
Good.
And Kathy, how many Oh yeah, go ahead, Jane.
I was just going to ask Kathy the question: have the coaches all, or are they contemplated being hired independently, so the coaches are all independent of each other?
Yeah, the way the request has gone out, it's as individuals. Though I do know one other person being considered, and I would have a discussion with them before engaging if we were both selected.
Because I was listening carefully to what David was saying, which I think are really good ideas. And one of the things you might consider is if you can build into the design at least an upfront, a midpoint, and an after-action check-in with the champion of the program. So if they're uncomfortable putting the whole team together for whatever reason, maybe you could just do that so the champion gets the data.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Kathy, I was also wondering, what do you think about the possibility of supervision for the team of coaches?
Well, I think, I engage in supervision, so I think it would be really important to have that perspective. The only team supervision model I know is the one based by Hawkins, right? The 7-9 and then the other 3. And the other coach and I are, we are familiar with the 7-9 models, so it would be about us. I think it would be definitely part of how we contract working together, though we're not really working together, we're working in the same system. And I think if I take a systemic approach, then we really need to be aware of how we're interacting with each other.
Yeah, I was thinking of like a group coaching, group supervision, get a supervision, but for you as a group of coaches all in a group session.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense. And it's something that I'm actually exploring. I'm looking to see who on the ground is doing supervision or who on the ground is doing team coaching or group coaching and wants to engage in supervision.
And there are a number of the folks that I've interviewed on the podcast do supervision. I'm sure it could be done virtually.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
David, do you do supervision?
I do. It's funny. I haven't done as much coaching supervision. I've done a lot of clinical supervision over the years with trainees here at Yale and elsewhere. So both group working, supervising folks working with the same group of people, or people who are doing individual work as well. So
yeah. A couple folks I've interviewed that might be really good for that. Catherine Carr, somebody who does supervision that I interviewed. I know, I'm not sure about Jennifer Britton or not. I guess you would know whether she would do that, Kathy. Jennifer Porter, I just interviewed recently. She also does some team coaching supervision. So there's a couple folks I've interviewed on the podcast. I mentioned Jacqueline Peters might be good for that as well. So I think there's some folks out there and David, that might be available for that kind of thing if you're looking for supervision. But cool.
Thanks. That's really helpful.
Awesome. Well, listen, folks, we are sort of getting down towards the end of our time in this 1 hour, which just flies by. And anyways, maybe we could, maybe we'll do just a little go around with a closing comment. And maybe I can kick it off and just say, thanks for coming to today's session. Part of the experiment with these webinar hangouts, as I've said in previous sessions, is rather than have sort of a classic webinar where you have one person presenting and sharing content and then getting a bit of feedback, was really just to kind of throw the agenda out the window and really allow what's percolating for folks. So anyways, I'd love to hear your feedback on that. Maybe we'll go back and forth with these webinar sessions and then do some of these more less structured ones and then bring on some folks. I know some of the guests that I've had on the podcast probably would love to come on and just do a session focusing on some of their work. So we may toggle back and forth. So I'd love a little bit of your feedback around that. But just a little plug, we have some really great guests coming up. I'm hoping to get Peter Hawkins interviewed this week. I think that's going to be a really exciting interview. Next week, I have Marita Frijan coming on from ORSC, the Center for Right Relationship, a real pioneer in the area of team coaching. I think 15 years ahead of her time around this topic. I think that's going to be a really interesting, really fascinating person. I think it's going to be a really great interview. I am now working on getting a date with Kubis Needling, who created the MBI, and getting him on to really come on and talk about working with teams around creativity. He's a real creativity scholar. And I have some others. Phil Sandahl from Team Coaching International, another early pioneer. He co-wrote the book on coactive coaching with the founders of CTI. We're going to be having him on in early June, and some others that I haven't listed off here. So I think we have some really great episodes coming up. Hope you'll tune in for that. And anyways, just nice to connect with some other team coaches this evening, and always a little bit of learning. But thank you so much. And maybe we can just go around the horn a little bit, any sort of closing comments, and then we can wrap up tonight's session. So Jane or David, do you guys want to jump in next? Any closing thoughts to share?
I'll just say it's really, I really enjoyed this conversation. I really liked hearing about what you're up to, Jane and Kathy and Raphael. We're all on our own sort of journey, and we all have our own sort of contexts and specialties that we work in, but there are a lot of mutual points of overlap when it comes to this work. So it's great to hear sort of the challenges and the sort of strategies that other people are using. So I really appreciated the opportunity to come converse with everybody tonight.
Great. Thanks for taking your time to join tonight, David. Jane, how about you? Closing thoughts?
I want to echo David's comments. I'm finding this very valuable and really thought-provoking, which I think when you do work on your own, obviously we all do a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of communicating with our networks, but I'm finding this very useful in terms of getting very different perspectives than I'm normally exposed to, and I'm finding that very helpful.
Cool. Well, great. Thanks for taking your time out tonight, Jane, and great to have you on. Raphael, Kathy, any closing thoughts from you guys?
Great conversation. I learned a lot. I thank you for sharing not only what brought you to team coaching, but also your input and perspectives. Really appreciate a lot the conversation.
Great having you on tonight, Raphael, and thank you so much for sharing your experience as well. That was wonderful. And Kathy, any final comments from you?
No, just to ditto what everyone said. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and it's part of practice. I think is just sitting and discussing what you're doing, and I think thank you, Krista, for providing us with the opportunity.
Awesome.
Right on.
Great, guys. So thank you again for coming tonight. We'll have another session coming up next month, and hope to see you come back, and very open to feedback around ideas. This is experiment and learning through doing. So love to get your feedback on ways to make this webinar even more effective and serve your needs. That's really what it's about. So listen, everyone, have a great evening wherever you are, and stay in the zone. We'll see you real soon.
Thanks, Krista.
Thanks, Krista.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night.